Um, so we're going to begin this lecture on Romans 12:1 and 2 today, and we'll finish it tomorrow. But I want to start with what my friend and now yours, Tim Wiebe, calls the 35,000-foot level. I want to take a high-level view of the whole book of Romans, because you can't understand what's going on in Romans 12 unless you understand what's going on in Romans generally. So we see in this first verse of Romans 12, we see this word therefore, which I've told you before. If you see the word therefore, you have to figure out what it's there for. And we'll figure that out when we get there. But he says, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God. So Paul's general way of conducting or crafting his letters, most of them come in two parts. The first part is theology, and then the second part is application. So he writes truths about the gospel, about Christ, about God, and then he applies them in the second part. It's not necessarily half and half. In Romans, we don't get around to the, yes? Yes. So you can watch the rest of the scintillating video at home. Try not to read and, hear all those things. That's why I think it's weird. And not all of Paul's letters do this, but generally speaking, he splits it between theology and Romans. It's theology and application. It's no surprise in the book of Romans that it's heavily theological, 11 chapters of theology, because this is his most theologically dense book. It's not a systematic theology, but it is a deep theology. I'm in Romans actually right now, studying Romans right now. Studying maybe is too but that's what I'm in for my morning quiet time, and it's just so deep theologically. So then, after he gets done with this this theology, then he turns and says, essentially, in light of this, right? So in Romans 1 through 11, it is a theology of who God is and what he has done, and particularly what he has done for us in Christ. And then he turns in verse 1 of chapter 12 and essentially says, based on all I've just written, do this. So he says it this way, by the mercies of God, or in view of God's mercies, is how the NIV puts it. So in view of God's mercies, and then he's going to give a command. Present yourselves as living sacrifices, right? So now we're moving from theology to application. So in light of all that God has done for us, as outlined in 1 through 11, he says, present yourselves as a living sacrifice. So that begs the question, what has God done? What is it? We didn't just read Romans 1 through 11, right? So what is it that's in Romans 1 through 11 that is the therefore? And in view of those verses, what are those mercies that God has given us? So I'm going to tell them to you. Here's what God has done according to Paul. Paul is saying, in light of the gospel of Christ, that's what chapter 1 is all about. And he's saying, in light of our helpless plight as sinners, that's chapters 3 through 5 of Romans. And in light of God's rescue mission to save us, to justify us, to make us right with God, which is something that we couldn't do on our own, and that's what chapters 3 and 4 are about in Romans. And in light of the assurance we have as believers, that's chapters 5 through 8. And in light of the fact that Jesus has set us free from the power and penalty of sin, that's Romans 6. And in light of the fact that Jesus has set us free from bondage to the law, that's chapter 7. And in light of the fact that we can never be separated from the love of God in Christ, that's chapter 8. And in light of God's grace toward us as Gentiles, whom he included in his people, simply because he chose to do so, that's chapters 9 through 11. So in summary, in light of all that God has done throughout history and salvation history, what are we to do? Now what? Present your bodies as living sacrifices. So then chapters 12 through 15 are general areas of Christian living and obedience. And then chapters 14 and 15 are specific relational matters within the church at Rome. So now we're going to jump into Romans 1, 1 and 2 more deeply, but we're going to wait for that until tomorrow. Now, I think I see some quizzical looks coming from that general part of the room. Are we good? Okay. Okay, good. Because I'm a freight train teacher. Okay, that's it for today.